The evening air carried a hint of autumn as Maya Chen tied her apron around her waist, stealing a glance at her watch. She was starting her second shift of the day at the Silver Spoon, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. At 25, she moved with the efficiency of someone who had been balancing plates and memorizing orders for years. "Chen, you're on the private lounge tonight," called out Hank, the floor manager, as he passed by with a stack of fresh menus. "Big spender. Very big spender." Maya nodded, tucking a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear. The private lounge meant better tips, but it also meant dealing with people who expected the world to bend to their money. She'd learned to put on a smile that never reached her eyes, to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, and to become practically invisible when necessary. "Who is it this time?" Maya asked, checking her reflection in the polished surface of a serving tray. "Another Wall Street type celebrating a bonus?" Hank shook his head. "Elliot Winters," the name hung in the air. Even Maya, who barely had time to scroll through news feeds between shifts and college textbooks, knew who Elliot Winters was. The tech billionaire had built his fortune on a series of apps that predicted user behavior so accurately that people joked he could read minds. His face was on magazine covers, his name in headlines, and his personal life the subject of endless speculation. "Great," Maya muttered under her breath. She'd served wealthy customers before, but someone like Winters was in another league entirely. "How many in his party?" 15 confirmed. "They've reserved the entire lounge. There's a hired pianist coming for background music, and they've pre-ordered the chef's special tasting menu with wine pairings." Hank handed her a tablet with the evening's details. "Don't worry, you'll have help. Luis and Danny will be assisting." Maya scrolled through the information, mentally calculating what this could mean for her tips. A good night could cover next month's textbooks for her sister Lily, who was studying engineering on a partial scholarship. Their parents' insurance hadn't been enough after the accident 3 years ago, and as the older sister, Maya had put her own dreams on hold. "Oh, and Chen," Hank called as he walked away. "Mr. Winters has a reputation for being particular. Just stay sharp." 2 hours later, the private lounge was buzzing with conversation and the gentle clink of crystal glasses. The room, with its panoramic view of the city skyline, was filled with the kind of people who measured time in deals closed and millions made. Maya moved between them like water, refilling glasses before they were empty and appearing at elbows the moment someone glanced around for service. Elliot Winters sat at the center of it all. He wasn't what Maya had expected. In his early 40s, he was dressed simply in a dark sweater and tailored pants that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and when he spoke, everyone leaned in slightly, as if afraid to miss a word. "The secret," he was saying as Maya approached with another bottle of wine, "is knowing what people want before they know it themselves." The group around him nodded appreciatively, hanging on every word. Maya kept her eyes down as she carefully poured the burgundy liquid into his glass. "Excuse me," a woman at the edge of the group caught Maya's attention. "Could I get some still water?" Maya smiled. "Of course, right away." As she turned to go, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Hank was speaking urgently into his phone, his normally composed face creased with worry. Maya felt a flutter of concern. Whatever was happening wasn't good. She was halfway to the kitchen when Hank intercepted her. "We have a problem," he said in a low voice. "The pianist canceled. Car trouble on the bridge. He's not going to make it." Maya glanced back at the lounge where an expensive grand piano sat untouched in the corner. "Can't we just put on some background music through the sound system?" Hank shook his head. "Mr. Winters specifically requested live piano music. He mentioned it 3 times during the booking." The knot in Maya's stomach tightened. "What are we going to do?" "I'm calling around, but on a Friday night." Hank didn't need to finish the sentence. Finding a replacement on short notice would be nearly impossible. Maya continued with her duties, delivering the water and taking additional orders, all while feeling the tension build. She could see Hank at the edge of the room, still making calls, his expression growing more desperate by the minute. It was during a quiet moment, as she waited at the bar for a drink order, that Maya found herself humming softly. It was an old habit, something she did unconsciously when stressed. The melody was from a piece she'd composed years ago before life had taken an unexpected turn. "You have a good ear." The voice startled her. Elliot Winters had approached the bar without her noticing, his glass empty in his hand. Up close, his eyes were sharper than they appeared from a distance, observant in a way that made Maya feel uncomfortably seen. "Thank you, sir," she replied, automatically reaching for the wine bottle to refill his glass. Winters set his glass down and studied her face. "That piece you were humming, Chopin?" Maya shook her head, surprised he'd noticed. "No, just something I made up." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You compose music?" "Used to," Maya corrected, focusing on pouring his wine perfectly. "A long time ago." Before she could step away, Winters glanced over at the empty piano. "I understand we're without entertainment tonight." Maya followed his gaze and nodded. "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry about that." "The pianist had an emergency. Do you play?" he asked abruptly. The question caught her off guard. Maya hesitated, knowing the wisest answer was a simple no. Yet something in his direct gaze made lying feel impossible. "I did. Once." A slow smile spread across Winter's face, not reaching his eyes. "Interesting." He took his wine and returned to his guests, leaving Maya with a strange feeling of unease. She watched as he spoke to a few people, their heads turning to look in her direction. Her cheeks warmed under the scrutiny. Moments later, Hank approached, his expression a mix of hope and discomfort. "Maya, can I speak with you privately?" In the hallway outside the lounge, Hank got straight to the point. "Mr. Winters says you play the piano." Maya felt her chest tighten. "I used to, but I haven't played in years, Hank. Not seriously." "He's offering $10,000 for you to play tonight," Hank said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "10,000, Maya. For an hour of background music." The amount struck her like a physical blow. $10,000 would cover Lily's tuition for the entire semester, with enough left over to fix the leaky roof in their small apartment. "I can't," she said, her throat dry. "I'm not prepared. I don't have music. I'm dressed as a server, for crying out loud." Hank looked desperate. "Maya, you don't understand. The Silver Spoon has been trying to get Winters to host events here for years. He could become a regular client. The owner just called me personally. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you refuse, it won't just disappoint Mr. Winters. The owner made it very clear that he considers this a critical business opportunity." Hank didn't need to spell out the implications. Maya closed her eyes briefly, feeling trapped. Her job, the steady income that kept her sister in college and a roof over their heads, was being implicitly threatened. All because she'd made the mistake of humming a tune. When she returned to the lounge, the atmosphere had shifted. People were looking at her with curious expressions, some amused, others skeptical. Elliot Winters stood by the piano, one hand resting on its gleaming surface. "Ah, there she is," he announced as she entered, drawing all eyes to her. "Our hidden talent." Maya felt her face flush as conversations paused. "Mr. Winters, I'm flattered, but I really don't play anymore. It's been years." He tilted his head, studying her like an interesting puzzle. "Your hands say otherwise," he noted. "Long fingers, calluses in the right places despite your current job. You weren't just a casual player." Maya instinctively tucked her hands into the pockets of her apron. How had he noticed such details in their brief interaction? "I'm offering good money for a simple service," Winters continued, his voice carrying across the now quiet room. $10,000 for an hour of your time. Most people would jump at that opportunity. A woman in a red dress laughed softly. "Perhaps she's afraid, Elliot. Not everyone performs well under pressure." Maya felt a flash of indignation cut through her anxiety. The comment wasn't just dismissive. It carried an undercurrent of mockery. "It's not fear," she said more firmly than she intended. "It's been 3 years since I've played regularly. I'm out of practice." 3 years, Winters repeated as if confirming a suspicion. What happened 3 years ago? The personal question hung in the air. Maya was suddenly aware of how silent the room had become, how everyone was watching this exchange like a tennis match. "Life happened," she answered simply, unwilling to share her family's tragedy with strangers who saw her as evening entertainment. Winters nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something for him. "Life has a way of interrupting our plans, doesn't it?" For a moment, something almost genuine flashed in his eyes. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek money clip. He counted out bills with deliberate slowness. 10,000, he said, placing the stack on top of the piano. "For one song. Not even an hour. Just one piece of your choosing." The money sat there, more cash than Maya had ever seen in one plow. See. She thought about Lily, about the sacrifices they'd both made, about the mounting bills and the dreams they'd put aside. One song, Winters repeated, and then you can go back to being invisible if that's what you want. The words stung with their accuracy. She had become invisible in many ways. Her identity reduced to the person who brought food and cleared plates. But there had been a time when she'd commanded attention with just her music, when she'd been accepted to a prestigious conservatory with a bright future ahead. Maya felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. Probably Lily, checking in after her evening class. What would her sister tell her to do? The answer came immediately. Lily would tell her to play, to take the money and the opportunity. May I use the restroom first? Maya asked, needing a moment to collect herself. Winters gestured magnanimously. Of course. We'll wait. As Maya hurried to the staff bathroom, her heart pounded against her ribs. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, taking deep breaths. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed her sister. Lily, she said when her sister answered. I need your advice fast. You want me to what? Lily's voice crackled through the phone, the background noise suggesting she was on the bus heading home from her evening class. Play piano for who? Elliot Winters, Maya repeated, lowering her voice even though she was alone in the staff bathroom. The tech billionaire. He's offering $10,000 for one song, Lily. 10,000. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Maya could practically see her sister's expression. The widening eyes, the slight furrow between her brows that appeared whenever she was thinking hard. That's crazy money for one song, Lily finally said. But Maya, you haven't played in years. Not since Mom and Dad, Maya finished for her. The piano in their childhood home had been sold along with almost everything else to cover funeral expenses and medical bills. I know. Can you still play? I mean, would your fingers remember? Maya glanced down at her hands. They were different now. Tougher, with small burns from hot plates and tiny scars from kitchen accidents. But underneath the server's calluses were the old ones. The pianist's calluses that never fully disappeared. I don't know, she admitted. But Lily, the rent is due next week and your tuition payment. Forget about that, Lily cut in firmly. This isn't about money. Well, not just about money. When was the last time you even sat at a piano? Maya leaned against the bathroom sink. There's a keyboard at the community center. I've played around on it a few times when no one was there. She hadn't told Lily about those stolen moments. How sometimes after a late shift, she would slip into the darkened recreation room and play softly, her fingers finding their way home on the keys. Then do it, Lily said with the straightforward confidence of someone who had always been Maya's biggest supporter. Not for the money, though that's a nice bonus. Do it because deep down I think you miss it. Maya's throat tightened. What if I mess up? What if I make a fool of myself in front of all these rich people? Then you'll have a funny story to tell, Lily said simply. And $10,000. A knock on the bathroom door made Maya jump. I have to go, she whispered. I'll call you after. Play Mom's favorite, Lily said quickly before hanging up. You always played it best. Maya took a deep breath, tucked her phone away, and opened the door to find Luis, one of the other servers, waiting anxiously. You okay? He asked, genuine concern in his eyes. Hank sent me to check on you. Everyone's waiting. Great, Maya muttered, smoothing down her uniform. No pressure. Is it true? You're going to play? Luis fell into step beside her as they headed back toward the lounge. I didn't know you were a pianist. I'm not. Not anymore. Maya paused at the entrance to the lounge where she could see the guests had arranged their chairs to face the piano. What had been background furniture was now center stage. At least I haven't been for a long time. Luis gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze. Well, good luck. I've got your tables covered, so take your time. As Maya stepped back into the lounge, the murmur of conversations died down. 15 pairs of eyes turned to her, including Elliot Winters, whose gaze held a mixture of curiosity and challenge. The stack of bills still sat on top of the piano, an obscene amount of money for what these people probably considered trivial entertainment. Hank appeared at her side, his professional smile masking the anxiety she knew he must be feeling. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, we're delighted to present a special performance by one of our own talented staff members, Maya Chen. There was a polite smattering of applause, more indulgent than enthusiastic. Maya felt her cheeks grow warm as she made her way to the piano, very aware of her waitress uniform and sensible shoes among the designer clothes and expensive jewelry that surrounded her. The piano bench felt foreign yet familiar as she sat down. The gleaming Steinway Grand was worlds away from the upright she'd grown up playing, or the worn keyboard at the community center. This was an instrument that cost more than she would make in 5 years. "What will you be playing for us?" asked a woman with silver hair styled in an elegant bob, her tone suggesting she was merely being polite. Maya's mind went blank. She had intended to follow Lily's suggestion and play their mother's favorite piece, a Chopin nocturne that had filled their small apartment on countless evenings. But suddenly that felt too personal, too precious to share with these strangers who saw her as nothing more than temporary amusement. "Something original," she found herself saying. The murmurs that followed held notes of surprise and, from some thinly veiled skepticism. Elliot Winters raised an eyebrow. "You compose as well?" "I used to." Maya flexed her fingers, fighting the trembling that threatened to overtake them. She hadn't performed for an audience since her conservatory audition over 3 years ago. That day, the judges had leaned forward in their seats, impressed by the emotion in her original piece. The acceptance letter had arrived a week later, on the same day as the phone call about her parents' accident. As she positioned her hands above the keys, Maya realized she had no idea what she was going to play. The piece that had been humming through her mind all evening was unfinished, something she'd started composing in the dark days after the funeral but had never completed. She took a deep breath and pressed down on the first key. The note hung in the air, clear and perfect. For a moment, Maya feared she would freeze, that her fingers would refuse to continue. But then, like water finding its way downhill, the music began to flow. It started softly, hesitantly, a simple melody that spoke of quiet mornings and gentle conversations. Without conscious thought, Maya's left hand joined in, adding depth and complexity. The music built gradually, like a story unfolding, each phrase leading naturally to the next. She didn't look at her audience. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting memory guide her fingers. The restaurant, the wealthy guests, even Elliot Winters with his challenging stare, all faded away. There was only the music, speaking what words could not. As the piece progressed, Maya found herself playing not just what she remembered composing, but what should have come next. The unfinished sections completed themselves under her touch, as if they had been waiting all this time for her to return to them. The melody transformed. What began as something wistful evolved into something more complex. There were moments of discord that resolved into unexpected harmony, passages of light and shadow that reflected the journey of the past 3 years. Through half-closed eyes, Maya caught glimpses of movement in the room. Louise had paused by the door, tray in hand, listening. The kitchen staff was peeking through the service entrance. Even Hank stood motionless, his ever-present tablet forgotten at his side. Elliot Winters had leaned forward in his chair, the smug expression replaced by something more genuine, surprise perhaps, or recognition. The silver-haired woman had closed her eyes. A man who had been checking his phone continuously throughout the evening had set it down on the table, forgotten. As Maya approached what felt like the natural conclusion of the piece, she wove in threads of her mother's favorite nocturne, not enough for anyone else to recognize, but a private tribute that brought tears to her eyes. Her fingers danced across the keys one final time, bringing the music to a gentle, resolving end. The last note lingered in the air, and then there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. Maya slowly opened her eyes, suddenly aware again of where she was and what she had done. The absence of immediate applause made her stomach clench with uncertainty. Had she embarrassed herself after all? Had the piece only sounded good to her own ears? Then she saw the faces of her audience. Some were staring at her with wide eyes. Others were hastily dabbing at tears. The silver-haired woman was gazing at nothing, lost in whatever memories the music had stirred. And Elliot Winters, the demanding billionaire who had started all this, was perfectly still, an unreadable expression on his face. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before being broken by the sound of hands coming together. Not the polite, obligatory applause from before, but something genuine and spontaneous. It spread through the room, growing in volume until Maya felt overwhelmed by it. She stood awkwardly, unused to being the center of attention in this way. Her legs felt unsteady beneath her, and she gripped the edge of the piano for support. That was... The silver-haired woman seemed at a loss for words, a rarity, judging by her confident demeanor. Extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Others joined in with compliments that Maya barely registered, her mind still partly in the world of the music she'd created. She nodded and murmured thank yous, wondering if she could slip away now, return to the anonymity of her server's role. But Elliot Winters was approaching, and the room quieted again. He stopped in front of her, studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. "You never finished that piece before tonight, did you?" he asked quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Maya blinked in surprise at his perception. "How did you know?" "I could hear it in the transitions," he said. "The moment when memory became creation. It was..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It was like watching someone remember who they really are." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his money clip again. "The original offer stands," he said, gesturing to the stack of bills already on the piano. "But I'd like to double it." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Maya's eyes widened. "That's not necessary." "It is," Winters cut her off. "I recognize talent when I see it, Ms. Chen, and I recognize passion. Both are surprisingly rare, even among professionals." He counted out another stack of bills and added it to the first. "Consider it an investment." Maya stared at the money, $20,000 more than she made in a year of double shifts and careful budgeting. It could change everything for her and Lily. But something in Winter's words made her pause. "An investment in what exactly?" she asked, caution tempering her gratitude. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That," he said, "is what I'd like to discuss with you after dinner." Maya spent the rest of her shift in a daze. The money, $20,000 in cash, was locked safely in Hank's office. He had insisted on holding it for her until the end of the night, his eyes wide with disbelief when she told him the amount. "You must have really impressed him," Hank had said, carefully placing the stacks of bills in the small safe under his desk. "I've never seen Winters show genuine interest in anyone who wasn't already famous or powerful." Now, as Maya moved between tables with a tray of desserts, she could feel the weight of curious gazes following her. Word had spread quickly among the restaurant staff about her unexpected performance. Luis gave her a thumbs up whenever they passed each other, and even the head chef had emerged briefly from the kitchen to nod approvingly in her direction. The atmosphere in the private lounge had shifted too. Guests who had barely noticed her before now smiled when she approached, some even attempting to engage her in conversation about her music. The silver-haired woman pressed a business card into her hand with a whispered, "Call me if you're interested in playing at charity events." Only Elliot Winters maintained his distance, deep in discussion with two men Maya recognized from tech magazines as venture capitalists. Occasionally she would catch him glancing in her direction, that same unreadable expression on his face. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Maya felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. What did Winters want to discuss? And why did it feel so important? "Chen," Hank approached as she was clearing the last of the coffee cups. "Mr. Winters has requested you join him on the terrace when you're finished here. He's asked to speak with you privately." Maya's stomach tightened. "Is that an order?" Hank hesitated. "It's a request, but..." He lowered his voice. "Look, tonight was huge for the restaurant. Whatever Winters said to the owner on the phone after your performance, it worked. They've already booked 3 more events for the next 2 months. So it is an order," Maya concluded, setting down her tray. "Just hear him out," Hank said, not denying it. 10 minutes of your time. That's all." The terrace was Maya's favorite part of the restaurant, a small oasis overlooking the city, with potted trees strung with tiny lights and comfortable seating arranged to take advantage of the view. During her breaks, she sometimes slipped out here to catch her breath and remind herself that there was a world beyond dirty dishes and demanding customers. Tonight, it was empty except for Elliot Winters, who stood at the railing looking out at the glittering skyline. He had put on a light jacket against the evening chill, and with his back to her, Maya was struck by how ordinary he appeared, just a man gazing at the city lights, perhaps contemplating the same view she often lost herself in. "You're playing," he said without turning around, somehow sensing her presence. "It reminded me of something I haven't thought about in years." Maya stayed by the door, maintaining a careful distance, What was that? He turned then, and in the soft glow of the string lights, his face seemed less sharp, more human. My grandfather was a piano tuner. Not famous, not wealthy, just a man who understood instruments better than he understood people. He smiled faintly at the memory. He used to say you could tell everything about a pianist from the first 30 seconds of their playing. Not their skill level, but their heart. Maya wasn't sure how to respond. This wasn't the conversation she had expected. Winters gestured to one of the chairs. Please sit. I promise this won't take long. Cautiously, Maya took a seat, choosing one that allowed her to keep some space between them. The evening breeze carried the scent of the potted jasmine that bordered the terrace, mingling with the faint sounds of the city below. I grew up listening to him talk about music, Winters continued, taking the seat across from her, about how a truly great performance wasn't about technical perfection, but about honesty, about playing from a place of truth. He studied her face. That's what you did tonight, isn't it? Maya felt oddly exposed, as if he had glimpsed something private. I just played what I felt. Exactly. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare that is? In a world where everything is calculated, marketed, focus grouped to death, to simply express something real? He shook his head. I've attended concerts by world-famous pianists who haven't moved me the way your playing did tonight. Despite herself, Maya felt a flush of pride at his words. Music had been her voice, her way of making sense of the world before life had intervened. Thank you, she said simply. But I'm not sure what this has to do with your investment comment. Winters nodded, acknowledging the redirect. Direct, I appreciate that. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather portfolio, which he placed on the table between them. My sister, Diana Winters, is the dean of the Manhattan Conservatory of Music. Maya's breath caught. The Manhattan Conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. Not quite Juilliard, where she had once been accepted, but easily in the top 5. She's always complaining that she finds plenty of technically proficient students, but very few with genuine artistic voice, Winters continued, sliding the portfolio toward Maya. I think she would be very interested in meeting you. With slightly trembling fingers, Maya opened the portfolio. Inside was a business card, elegant cream cardstock with embossed lettering, and what appeared to be an application form for the conservatory's special admission program. I don't understand, Maya said, looking up from the papers. The academic year has already started. And I haven't played seriously in years. I'm not prepared for an audition. The winter semester begins in January, Winters explained. And Diana runs a special program for exceptional talents who don't fit the traditional admission timeline. Non-traditional students, she calls them. People with unusual backgrounds or circumstances. He gestured to the form. It's competitive, only 5 spots each year. But a personal recommendation from Diana carries significant weight. Maya stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. And you're offering to recommend me? You barely know me. You heard me play one piece. One piece was enough, he said with surprising gentleness. Besides, I'm not offering a free ride. This would be an opportunity you'd have to earn. Diana doesn't take my recommendations lightly. Quite the opposite. She'll be twice as hard on anyone I send her way. Maya looked down at the application, memories washing over her. The day her acceptance letter to Juilliard had arrived. The pure joy she'd felt showing it to her parents. The plans they'd made together. And then the phone call that had changed everything, sending her life veering in an entirely different direction. I can't, she said quietly, closing the portfolio and pushing it back across the table. I have responsibilities. My sister is in college. I work double shifts just to keep us afloat. I can't just start over. Winters didn't immediately reach for the portfolio. The program includes a stipend, he said. Not enough to live lavishly in Manhattan, but enough to cover basic expenses if you're careful. And there are scholarships available for those who demonstrate both need and exceptional talent. Why are you doing this? Maya asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Is this some kind of charity project for you? Find a struggling waitress with a hidden talent, change her life, feel good about yourself. If her bluntness offended him, Winters didn't show it. Instead, he seemed to consider her question carefully. 20 years ago, he said after a moment, I was a different person with different dreams. I wanted to build beautiful, useful, all things that would help people connect with each other. A shadow crossed his face. Somewhere along the way, that vision got diluted. The companies I built became about metrics and growth and shareholder value. He looked out at the city lights again. You hear the same complaints about classical music, that it's become sterile, disconnected from emotion, all technique and no heart. That's what my grandfather used to say was happening. He turned back to Maya. Your playing tonight reminded me that there's another way, that authenticity still matters, that it's still possible to create something that simply speaks. Maya didn't know how to respond. There was something unexpected in his words, a vulnerability she wouldn't have associated with someone like Elliot Winters. So this isn't charity, he continued. Consider it a selfish act. The world needs more music like yours, and I'm in a position to help make that happen. A wry smile touched his lips. Besides, if you do succeed, Diana will never let me hear the end of it. She loves being right almost as much as I do. Despite herself, Maya felt a small laugh escape. The idea was absurd, impossible. And yet, a tiny part of her, the part that still dreamed in melodies and harmonies, stirred with something that felt dangerously like hope. I need to think about it, she said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. My sister, of course, Winters cut in, pushing himself to his feet. Take the portfolio. Talk it over with your sister. The application deadline is in 2 weeks. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out another business card, this one simpler than Diana's. My personal number, if you have questions or if there are obstacles we haven't discussed. Maya accepted the card, noting with surprise that it contained only a name and phone number. No title, no company logo, nothing to indicate who Elliot Winters was or what he did. Just a way to reach him. Thank you, she said, rising as well, for the opportunity and for... She hesitated, not wanting to sound ungrateful, for seeing something in my playing. Winters nodded, his expression softening slightly. Thank you for reminding me what music is supposed to sound like. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Maya shook it. His grip was firm but not overpowering. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her once more. Ms. Chen, whatever you decide, don't stop playing. The world is poorer when authentic voices fall silent. The weight of his words stayed with Maya as she made her way back through the restaurant, collecting her things in the envelope of cash from Hank's office. By the time she stepped out into the night, the exhaustion of the long day had caught up with her, mingling with the emotional aftermath of everything that had happened. The subway was nearly empty at this late hour. Maya found a seat and leaned her head against the window, watching the tunnel lights flash by in a hypnotic rhythm. In her bag, alongside the envelope that represented more money than she had ever held at once, was the leather portfolio with its promise of a different kind of future. She closed her eyes, and in her mind, she could still feel the keys beneath her fingers, still hear the music that had flowed through her after so long. For the first time in 3 years, the memory didn't bring pain, only a quiet certainty that something important had awakened. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. Lily, still awake despite the late hour. How did it go? Did you play? Maya smiled tiredly at her sister's enthusiasm. How could she possibly explain everything that had happened? The performance, the money, Winter's unexpected offer. It all seemed like something from a movie, not her real life. She typed a simple reply. I played. And everything's about to change. You're seriously considering this? Lily sat cross-legged on their small couch, still in her pajamas despite the late morning hour. The leather portfolio from Elliot Winters lay open on the coffee table between them. Alongside a half-empty pot of coffee and the remains of their breakfast, Maya nodded, tucking her feet underneath her in the armchair that had once belonged to their mother. It was one of the few pieces of furniture they'd kept after selling the house. I think I am. The sisters had been up half the night talking after Maya returned home, first exclaiming over the unexpected windfall, $20,000 that would ease their financial pressure significantly, and then discussing the even more unexpected opportunity that had come with it. But what about your job? What about my tuition? What about... That's why I said considering, Maya cut in gently. I haven't decided anything yet. But Lily, when I was playing last night, it was like something woke up inside me, something I thought was gone for good. Lily's expression softened. I know. I could hear it in your voice when you called. She leaned forward, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so like their mother that Maya's heart ached. But is this Winters guy for real? Why would a billionaire tech CEO care about helping some random waitress pursue music? It was the question Maya had been asking herself all night. He said it reminded him of why he started his companies in the first place. Something about authenticity and creating things that matter. She shrugged. Maybe he's having a midlife crisis, Lily snorted. Rich people, they always think throwing money at things makes them deep. That's not fair, Maya found herself saying, surprising them both. He seemed genuine. And it's not like he's paying for everything. He's just offering an introduction, a chance to audition for a program that would be hard to get into otherwise. A program that happens to be run by his sister, Lily pointed out, who apparently makes her own decisions, Maya countered, remembering Winter's comment about Diana being twice as hard on his recommendations. Look, I'm not naive. I know this could all fall apart. But what if it doesn't? What if this is a real chance to pick up the dream I had to set aside? The sisters fell silent, both thinking of the day everything had changed. The accident that had taken their parents had also derailed both their futures, Maya giving up her Juilliard acceptance to work full-time, Lily deferring her own college plans for a year. They'd been in survival mode for so long that thinking beyond the next bill payment felt almost dangerous. What about my school? Lily asked finally, her voice smaller. If you're studying full-time, how will we manage? Maya gestured to the envelope sitting beside the portfolio. $20,000 buys us some breathing room, and I wouldn't quit the restaurant right away. I'd cut back hours, not eliminate them completely. Plus the program includes a stipend, and there are scholarships I could apply for. She took a deep breath. And you could apply for more aid now that we have 2 students in the household instead of 1. Lily looked down at her coffee cup, tracing its rim with her finger. I just don't want you to get your hopes up and then get hurt again. Not after everything we've been through. I know, Maya said softly, but maybe it's time for us to do more than just survive. Maybe it's time to actually live again. Lily was quiet for a long moment before looking up, a new determination in her eyes. Okay then, let's do this. Let's at least try. Really? Maya hadn't expected her sister to come around so quickly. Really? Lily reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. Mom and Dad would want this for you. They'd want both of us to follow our dreams, not just get by. A mischievous smile spread across her face. Besides, I want to meet this billionaire guy who got so moved by my sister's playing that he's changing his whole worldview. Maya rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling back. It's not like that. He's just handsome, Lily teased. Charismatic, secretly longing for a simple waitress to teach him the meaning of life. Stop it. Maya threw a couch pillow at her sister, who caught it while laughing. He's at least 15 years older than me, and we're nothing alike. This is professional, that's all. If you say so, Lily sing-songed, dodging another pillow. But seriously, what's our next step? Maya pulled the application form toward her. I fill this out. Then I practice like crazy for the next 2 weeks. And then, she took a deep breath. Then I audition for Diana Winters and see if her brother's faith in me was justified. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Maya cut her shifts at the restaurant down to part-time, using some of Winter's money to give them financial breathing room. Hank was surprisingly supportive, especially after she explained the opportunity. Just promise you'll come play for us sometimes after you're famous, he'd said with a wink. With her newly free hours, Maya threw herself into preparation. The community center let her use their keyboard for practice during quiet hours. But it wasn't enough. The action was too light. The sound too electronic compared to the Steinway she'd played at the restaurant. 3 days into her practice schedule, a text arrived from an unknown number. How is the preparation coming along? Maya had stared at her phone, surprised that Elliot Winters would actually check in on her. After a moment's hesitation, she'd replied honestly, Need a real piano to practice on. Community center keyboard isn't cutting it. The response had come less than an hour later. Problem solved. Check with the manager at Steinway Hall tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. A practice room has been arranged for you, 2 hours daily until your audition. She'd stood frozen in the tiny kitchen, staring at her phone until Lily had asked what was wrong. When she'd shown her sister the text, Lily's eyes had widened. Okay, maybe he is for Al, she'd admitted. The practice room at Steinway Hall was small but perfect, acoustically balanced, with a beautiful grand piano that responded to Maya's touch like a living thing. The staff treated her with professional courtesy, never asking why someone in worn jeans and sneakers had been granted daily access to their facilities. Each day, Maya felt her confidence growing along with her technical skills. Her fingers remembered more than she'd expected, and the music that had lain dormant inside her for 3 years flowed more freely with each practice session. She worked on 3 pieces for the audition: Bach's Prelude in C minor for technical precision, Debussy's Clair de Lune to showcase sensitivity and touch, and her own composition, expanded from what she'd played that night at the restaurant. This last piece evolved daily, becoming richer and more complex as Maya poured her experiences into the notes. The night before the audition, she received another text from Winters. "Diana doesn't know you're coming on my recommendation. She'll evaluate you purely on merit. Play like you did that night and you'll have nothing to worry about." Maya had responded with a simple "thank you," not knowing what else to say. The fact that he hadn't pulled strings to guarantee her acceptance was both terrifying and oddly reassuring. The Manhattan Conservatory of Music was housed in a stately building just off Lincoln Center, its stone facade speaking of tradition and excellence. Maya stood on the steps, clutching her music portfolio, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd been in a place like this. A place where music was the primary language, where what mattered wasn't how efficiently you could balance plates but how deeply you could interpret Bach. "You've got this," Lily said beside her, having insisted on taking the morning off from classes to accompany Maya for moral support. "Remember what Dad used to say?" Maya smiled at the memory. "Music is just feelings made audible." "Exactly." Lily straightened Maya's collar. "So make them hear how you feel." The admissions office was quiet and formal, staffed by a professional-looking woman who checked Maya's name against an appointment list and directed her to wait in a small anteroom. Through the walls she could hear faint strains of music, other students practicing, other lives dedicated to the art she had once thought lost to her. "Ms. Chen?" A tall woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a neat bun appeared in the doorway. "I'm Professor Wilson, head of performance studies. The dean will be joining us for your audition." Maya's pulse quickened. Diana Winters would be there personally. She had assumed the dean would only review recordings of promising candidates, not attend initial auditions herself. Professor Wilson led her down a corridor to a large studio with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. In the center sat a magnificent concert grand piano, its lid fully open. Along one wall were several chairs, 2 of them occupied by Professor Wilson after she took her seat, and by a woman Maya instantly recognized as Elliot Winters' sister. The family resemblance was subtle but unmistakable. The same observant eyes, the same way of sitting perfectly still while giving their complete attention. Diana Winters was younger than her brother, perhaps in her late 30s, with dark hair cut in a sleek bob and minimal jewelry except for a pair of small diamond studs. "Ms. Chen," Diana said, her voice cool and professional. "Your application was unusual. Late admission candidates typically have extensive performance backgrounds or come with recommendations from established musicians." She consulted a tablet in her lap. "Your submission mentions a 3-year gap in your musical education, with no formal training since high school. Yet you're applying for our advanced program." It wasn't a question, but Maya felt compelled to respond. "Yes, that's correct. Family circumstances required me to set aside my music studies." "I see." Diana's expression gave nothing away. "And what makes you think you're ready to join a program alongside students who have been practicing 6 to 8 hours daily for the past decade?" The bluntness of the question stung, but Maya recognized it for what it was. Not cruelty, but honesty about the competitive reality of the music world. "I don't know that I am," Maya admitted. "All I know is that music has always been my true voice, and I've recently rediscovered it. I'm willing to work twice as hard as anyone else to make up for lost time." Something flickered in Diana's eyes. Approval, perhaps at Maya's lack of empty promises or inflated self-assessment. "Very well, Ms. Chen. We'll begin with your prepared pieces, and then I'd like to test your sight-reading abilities." Diana set her tablet aside. "Whenever you're ready." Maya approached the piano, adjusting the bench to her height. As she settled her fingers above the keys, she caught a glimpse of Lily watching anxiously from a chair near the door, where she had been permitted to observe. Taking a deep breath, Maya began to play. The Bach came first, precise, controlled, a demonstration of technical ability rather than emotional expression. She could feel Diana and Professor Wilson listening critically, their trained ears catching every nuance, perhaps even the slight hesitation in one particularly difficult passage. When she finished, she moved directly into the Debussy without waiting for comment. This piece was different, impressionistic, evocative, requiring a delicate touch and sensitivity to color and shading. Maya lost herself in the flowing arpeggios, the gentle rise and fall of the melodic line, and then, finally, her own composition. The piece that had silenced a room full of jaded socialites. The piece that had awakened something in Elliot Winters and, more importantly, in herself. As the last notes faded, Maya kept her hands poised above the keys for a moment before slowly lowering them to her lap. The room was silent except for the faint sounds of traffic below and the distant practice rooms above. She turned to face her judges, heart pounding. Diana Winters was writing something on her tablet, her expression unreadable. Professor Wilson was watching Maya with a thoughtful expression. "Your technique needs refinement," Diana said finally, looking up. "Understandable, given your hiatus. Your interpretation of Bach was competent but cautious. The Debussy showed more promise." She set the tablet down. "But your original composition—" Maya held her breath. "That," Diana said, "is why we're having this conversation. Your original composition," Diana continued, her voice taking on a different quality, "shows something that can't be taught. A distinctive voice. An emotional authenticity that many technically perfect players never achieve." Maya felt a flutter of hope in her chest but remained silent, waiting. "Professor Wilson and I would like to test your sight reading and theory knowledge now," Diana said, giving no further hint of her thoughts. She nodded to the professor, who produced several sheets of music from a folder. For the next 20 minutes, Maya worked through increasingly difficult sight reading exercises. Some pieces she recognized and others completely unfamiliar. Her skills were rusty and she stumbled in places, particularly with the more complex modern pieces with their unusual time signatures and harmonies. Next came theory questions, identifying chord progressions by ear, explaining the structure of different musical forms, discussing the historical context of various compositional styles. Some answers came easily, drawing on knowledge that had once been second nature. Others revealed gaps in her education that years of waiting tables hadn't filled. Through it all, Diana's expression remained neutral, though Maya thought she occasionally caught a flicker of something. Surprise, perhaps, or approval, when she answered a particularly difficult question correctly. Finally, Diana set aside her notes and folded her hands in her lap. "Ms. Chen, your application presents us with an unusual situation. Your natural talent and compositional instincts are exceptional. Your technical skills, while solid, show the effects of your hiatus. Your theoretical knowledge has significant gaps." Maya nodded, accepting the assessment without argument. "The special admission program you've applied for is designed for musicians with unconventional backgrounds but extraordinary potential," Diana continued. "It's highly competitive with only 5 spots available. We typically receive over 100 applications for those spots." The hope that had been building in Maya's chest began to deflate. This was the gentle letdown, the "you're very talented but" speech she had been half expecting from the moment she walked in. Most successful applicants have some formal training within the past year, or extensive performance experience, or both, Diana added. "On paper, you don't meet our usual criteria." Maya glanced at Lily, who was watching with a worried expression. She tried to smile reassuringly at her sister, though her own disappointment was already settling in like a heavy weight. "However," Diana said, and something in her tone made Maya's attention snap back to her. "Paper criteria are guidelines, not absolutes." She exchanged a look with Professor Wilson, who gave a small nod. "We are prepared to offer you provisional acceptance to the program." Maya stared, certain she had misheard. "Provisional acceptance?" "Yes. You would begin in January with the understanding that your first semester is essentially a probationary period. You would take a combination of advanced courses in areas where you show strength, particularly composition, alongside remedial courses to address your technical gaps. Your progress would be reviewed monthly, and a final evaluation would determine if you continue. Beyond the first semester, The hope rekindled, stronger now. And if I pass the evaluation, then you would proceed as a full student in the program, eligible for the same degree track as any other student, Diana explained. But I must emphasize that the work required will be substantial. You're essentially attempting to condense years of training into months. I understand, Maya said, her mind already racing ahead to how she would rearrange her life, her work schedule, her living situation. I'm prepared for that. Diana studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once decisively. Very well. Professor Wilson will provide you with the necessary paperwork and information about financial aid options, including our scholarship for non-traditional students with demonstrated need. She stood, gathering her tablet and notes. Miss Chen, I'll be frank. When I see an application like yours, I typically look for who might have pulled strings to get it on my desk. Her gaze was direct, searching. Do you know anyone with connections to this institution? The question caught Maya off guard. This was the moment. Should she mention Elliot? His text had said Diana didn't know she was coming on his recommendation, but surely she would find out eventually. Maya hesitated, then decided on honesty. I recently met your brother, Elliot. He suggested I apply. Something like satisfaction flickered across Diana's face. I suspected as much. She paused. Elliot has recommended precisely 3 students to me in the 15 years I've been at the conservatory. All 3 had what he called the genuine article, a phrase our grandfather used for musicians who played from the heart rather than just the fingers. Maya hadn't expected this personal connection. He mentioned your grandfather was a piano tuner. He was more than that, Diana said, a hint of warmth entering her voice for the first time. He was our first teacher, and the reason both Elliot and I pursued careers in areas that value both technical precision and creative vision. She tilted her head slightly, though I stayed closer to music than my brother did. With that, she extended her hand. Welcome to the conservatory, Ms. Chen. Provisionally, of course. The handshake felt like crossing a threshold, from one life into another. Thank you. I won't waste this opportunity. See that you don't, Diana replied, businesslike once more. She nodded to Professor Wilson and left the room with brisk efficiency, the click of her heels fading down the corridor. As soon as the door closed, Lily rushed over, her face alight with excitement. You did it. You actually did it. Maya felt dazed, the reality still sinking in. Provisionally, she corrected, though she couldn't keep the smile from spreading across her face. Professor Wilson approached with a kind smile. Don't let Dean Winters intimidate you. Provisional is actually high praise coming from her. She doesn't waste the conservatory's resources, or her own time, on students she doesn't believe will succeed. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and information, course options, scholarship applications, practice room protocols, student resources. By the time Maya and Lily stepped back out onto the street, the autumn sun was high overhead, casting long shadows across the plaza. I can't believe this is real, Maya said, clutching the folder of materials to her chest. A month ago, I was just trying to make rent and keep your tuition paid. And now you're going to be a fancy music student, Lily finished, linking her arm through her sister's. Though I guess this means no more free desserts from the silver spoon. Maya laughed. I'm not quitting completely. I'll still work weekends. We need the income, and the scholarship only covers part of the tuition. Her smile softened. Besides, I owe Hank and the others. They were there for us when we needed it most. As they walked toward the subway, Maya's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out to find a text from Elliot Winters. Well? Such a simple question for something so life-changing. Maya stopped walking, considering her response. Lily peered over her shoulder. He's waiting to hear, Lily observed. What are you going to tell him? Maya typed carefully. Provisional acceptance. Your sister is intimidating but fair. After a moment's thought, she added, Thank you for the opportunity. I won't waste it. The response came less than a minute later. Congratulations. Diana doesn't do provisional unless she sees something worth investing in. The hard work begins now. Then a second text. The restaurant. 3 months from today. I'd like to hear how you're progressing. Maya stared at the screen, a mix of emotions washing through her, gratitude, determination, and a touch of nervousness at the thought of playing for him again. This time as a student actually worthy of her place at the conservatory. "What are you going to say?" Lily prompted. Maya smiled and typed, "I'll be there," with new music. 3 months later, on a crisp winter evening, Maya stood in the familiar private lounge of the Silver Spoon. The restaurant was closed for a private event, a small gathering that included Elliot Winters, his sister Diana, Professor Wilson, and a handful of other conservatory faculty. Hank had outdone himself with the preparation, treating the event with the same care he would a visit from the president. The silver was polished to a high shine, the linens crisp and perfect, the lighting just right. Luis and the other servers moved efficiently around the room, though they kept stealing proud glances at Maya, who stood by the piano in a simple black dress rather than her waitress uniform. The past 3 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of her life since her parents' passing. Days that began before dawn with practice and ended late at night with theory homework. Weekends still spent waiting tables, though Hank had been generous with scheduling. Moments of frustration when her fingers wouldn't move fast enough, or her mind couldn't grasp a complex theoretical concept. But also moments of pure joy when a difficult passage finally came together, or when a composition instructor praised her latest work. "You look different," Elliot observed as he approached the piano. "More confident," Maya smiled. "I feel different, like I've found my way back to something I thought was lost forever." She glanced around the room at these people who had become part of her journey in various ways. "I never expected any of this that night you pressured me into playing." "Pressured?" Elliot raised an eyebrow. "I merely provided an opportunity. You're the one who chose to take it." Diana joined them, elegant in a charcoal gray suit. "My brother has always had an eye for untapped potential, in business and occasionally in people." She gave Maya a small smile. "Your professors tell me you're making exceptional progress, particularly in composition." "It hasn't been easy," Maya admitted. "There are still days when I feel hopelessly behind the other students." "Of course there are," Diana said matter-of-factly. "That's how growth works. If it were easy, it wouldn't be worth doing." Elliot checked his watch. "I believe it's time for our musical interlude. That is, if our pianist is ready." Maya took a deep breath and nodded. As she settled onto the bench, adjusting it to her now familiar height, she caught sight of a new face entering the room, Lily, being escorted in by Hank. Her sister gave her a thumbs up and a wide grin. The room quieted as Maya placed her hands on the keys. Unlike that first night, there was no fear now, no uncertainty. In its place was a calm certainty, a knowledge that this was where she belonged. She began to play, not Bach or Debussy or any of the classical pieces she had mastered in her intensive training. Instead, she played a new composition, one that had been taking shape in her mind and heart over the past months. It contained echoes of that first improvised piece that had changed her life, but developed and expanded, incorporating elements of classical structure she had learned, yet remaining uniquely her own voice. The music told a story, of loss and struggle, yes, but also of unexpected opportunities, of doors opening, of finding one's way back to a path that had seemed forever closed. As the final notes faded into silence, Maya looked up to find Elliot watching her with an expression of quiet satisfaction. "That," he said simply, "is why I asked you to play that night." Later, as guests mingled over dessert, Lily pulled Maya into a quiet corner. "So," she said, nudging her sister's shoulder, "was it worth it? All the crazy hours, the stress, the complete upheaval of our lives?" Maya looked around the room. At Diana deep in conversation with her professors, at Hank and Luis proudly serving the distinguished guests, at Elliot standing by the window gazing out at the city lights. She thought of the small but growing folder of original compositions on her desk at home, of the calluses returning to her fingertips, of the feeling that came over her when she sat at a piano, any piano, and let the music flow. "Yes," she said, the word carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Some dreams are worth fighting to reclaim." Across the room, Elliot caught her eye and raised his glass in a silent toast. Maya smiled and nodded in acknowledgement, not just of him, but of the journey they had both taken. He had rediscovered something he'd lost in the pursuit of success. She had reclaimed a part of herself she thought was gone forever, and it had all begun with one song, played reluctantly on a night that now seemed like it belonged to another lifetime. A night when a billionaire had pressured a waitress into playing piano, neither of them knowing it would change both their lives forever.